And you are listening to Serf City on CFMH 107.3 FM. And Gordon and Peter now join me in the studio. Hi, guys.
How you doing, Mike?
How you doing? Thanks a lot for coming in.
No problem.
I think we were actually just chatting in the lobby, Gordon. I think I met you right around the time of your last show at Peter's, which would have been back in 1999.
That's correct. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
a group show. Yeah.
Group show.
Mass.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But my memory of you then was actually not at in the setting at Peter's Gallery, but in O'Leary's at 5 o'clock on a Friday. And I don't even think I knew at the time that you were a painter.
No, but that's probably where a lot of paintings were born. Maybe I don't know.
Well, let's just start off, Gordon, by jumping right in with the show. It's very eclectic. There's a lot of range here in terms of themes. The painting I touched on in my intro. Why don't you tell us? I want to know. I have my own interpretation, the things that evokes in my mind. But tell us a bit about where that painting came from.
Well, I mean, and I think you touched on it. I mean, it's certainly nostalgic, and it's certainly nostalgic for me too. I'm of course born in '59. And a baby boomer, and actually I have a vivid memory of that first television that was rolled into my parents' apartment when I was probably 4 or 5. So I've also, the test pattern, that iconic image, has always been something I've wanted to do something with, because it I guess was important to me. But I think more importantly for me, the work is talking about the fact that, you know, I'm the first generation that grew up with television. My parents, of course, it came along partway through their lives. And, you know, our world was irrevocably changed from that moment on. So when I first started thinking about this series, and I tend to work in series, it was more on the serious side of it. But then when I really started doing the first work, one of my, you know, big memories was Saturday mornings, getting up early and, you know, having those flannel Batman pajamas, because Batman was all the rage, of course. And having that bowl of Captain Crunch and sitting in front of that test pattern waiting for TV to start, because of course it didn't run 24/7 as it does now.
Right, so I really wasn't that off base then with the feelings that it was evoking in me.
No, and I think, you know, there's some you know, I certainly grew up with some humble backgrounds, but I was still, you know, fortunate enough to, you know, to have those experiences growing up. But what really fueled this kind of series, and it's going to continue, is I really feel my generation, you know, one of the first things that happens to you, you move into this, I think when you hit that first decade, it's significant. So for me, it was the 70s. You know, I was born in '59, you know, grew up through the 60s, and 1970 was a big event. You know, wow, we're going into this new decade. And it didn't really hit me till the next decade how significant it was, because in 1969, we watched a man land on the moon. And even though there was a lot of bad things happening in the world at the time, you know, there was the Cold War, there was Vietnam, the fact that that happened and we all watched it, I think gave my generation this sense of hope, and this sense that we could solve any problem and accomplish stuff. And I don't know if you remember this, but 10 years later, in 1980, on the paper every day was a doomsday clock that always read about 5 to 12. And this silly little thing that was on the paper, it's no longer there, but was there for many years, it was all about the fear of, you know, someone dropping the bomb. And I thought, well, how did that group go into the 80s with that kind of, you know, sense of foreboding? So the work is going to kind of go from there, but it's, the first painting was the nostalgic one. But
tell us about some of the other paintings in this series, because there's a real range here, and as I understand it, a lot of the definition around the show is the actual size of the paintings themselves, and not so much the subject material.
I've had the idea for the show for quite a while, and it really came about because I haven't shown very widely. I mean, I'm going to be 50 next week, but I really, you know, for someone my age, I've had relatively few shows. And so people would see certain series, and I do a lot of, my work's very eclectic, as you mentioned, and you know, people would see maybe the Target series and say, oh, that's what he does, or they'd see the domestic series, oh, that's what he does. And so I really thought, you know, I wanted to do a show where the common theme was just the size of the show, thus the name 4x4, because they're all 4 feet by 4 feet. But they do, I think they'll let people realize that there's quite a, you know, a variety in the show. And
Can you describe a couple of the other paintings just quickly, just to give listeners a sense of the breadth here in terms of the themes, in terms of the subject matter?
well, there's a few of the paintings which are partial paintings of targets. They're kind of pop art, abstract paintings. There's some that are figurative work, again on probably a pop art kind of sensibility. I've been very influenced by different styles, from the Renaissance to abstract expressionism and pop art, so a lot of that stuff crops up in my painting. And then there's some really traditional things, like a self-portrait, so there's a lot of...
And that's the self-portrait of you doing a portrait of somebody else, isn't it?
Yeah, it's actually, there's an unfinished painting in the background. Yeah, so it's kind of like the artist in the studio, and
And Peter, this is 10 years on now, and you had Gordon in a group show in 1999, and now you're staging a full show here.